A broke backpacker saves a woman in a snowstorm, not knowing she's a millionaire who'll change his life. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is now. Subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The snow roared like a beast, swallowing the Rockies in a blind fury. Ethan Carter trudged through the gale, his boots sinking into drifts, his breath a fleeting warmth against the cold. The wind clawed at his flannel, but his eyes, sharp as flint in the storm's blur, scanned the white void. A wanderer at 28, he carried little: a pack, a knife, a heart that beat to the rhythm of the wild. The storm didn't scare him. It was a language he understood. Then a shape loomed through the blur. A car, crumpled against a pine, its hood a twisted scar. Ethan's pulse quickened. He knelt by the driver's door, forcing it open against the snow's weight. Inside, a woman slumped, her auburn hair matted with frost, her lips pale as moonlight. Her pulse flickered under his fingers, faint but stubborn. Madeline, though he didn't know her name, was a stranger whose life now rested in his hands. No time for thought. Ethan lifted her, her weight slight but urgent. Her coat, fine wool, snagged on the wreckage. He tugged it free, its pockets laden with unseen keepsakes, jewels perhaps, or secrets, and slung it over his shoulder. Cradling her against his chest, her breath a soft rasp, he fought through the storm to his tent, pitched in a hollow where ridges loomed like silent elders. The canvas flapped like a trapped bird as he ducked inside, laying her on his sleeping bag. His hands, calloused but steady, worked fast, stripping wet gloves, rubbing warmth into her fingers. The fire he'd banked before glowed faintly. He fed it twigs, coaxing flames to life. Her face, lit by the fire's dance, held a fragile beauty, like a flower caught in ice. Ethan's heart stirred, not with desire, but with a quiet vow. He draped his spare blanket over her, its wool rough but warm. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice low, as if the storm might steal her away. He boiled snow in a tin cup, mixing in the last of his dried herbs. The steam rose like a prayer, and he held it near her lips, willing her to breathe its warmth. Minutes bled into hours. Ethan sat cross-legged, his gaze flicking between her face and the storm's howl outside. He spoke to fill the silence. Stories of the wild, of a deer he'd freed from a snare, its eyes thanking him before it vanished. His words were a tether, binding her to this world. Her chest rose and fell, a fragile rhythm, and he clung to it like a man adrift. Then her eyelids fluttered. Hazel eyes, clouded but alive, met his. Madeline's gaze held him, not with words but with a weight he couldn't name. She saw him, really saw him, in a way that pierced the solitude he wore like armor. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Instead, her eyes carried a secret, like a candle half shielded in a village night. Was it fear, gratitude, or something deeper, a truth she couldn't yet voice? Ethan's breath caught. "You're safe," he said, his voice a steady anchor. She blinked, slow, as if testing the word. Her hand twitched, brushing his, and the touch was a pulse in the cold. He pulled back, not from fear but from the sudden warmth of connection. Outside, the storm screamed, but within the tent, a fragile stillness bloomed, like a seed buried in snow. He didn't know her name, her world of marble halls and gilded chains. She didn't know his scars, the woven cords that haunted his wanderings. Yet in that moment, their lives tangled, a knot tied by chance, holding fast. The fire crackled, its light a fleeting bridge between them. Ethan's heart, so used to the wild solitude, felt a tremor, a pull toward her, as soft and sure as a river finding its course. Madeline's eyes closed again, her breath steadying. Ethan watched, his hands still, his mind racing. Who was she? Why did her gaze hold such weight? The storm raged on, but inside, a quiet vow took root. He would keep her safe, no matter what lay beyond the snow. The tense canvas trembled under the storm's fading growl, but inside, a fragile warmth held. Ethan Carter knelt by Madeline, her auburn hair splayed like autumn leaves on a sleeping bag. Her pulse, steadier now, was a quiet drumbeat against the Rockies' wrath. He fed the fire, its crackle a defiant hymn, and checked her brow. No fever, but her silence spoke louder than words. At 28, Ethan knew the wild's mercy and its cruelty. This woman, a stranger, was now his charge. He rummaged in his pack, pulling out a tin of dried beans and a cracked mug. Snow melted in the tin, hissing as it met flame. He stirred in the beans, the scent grounding him. Madeline stirred, her hazel eyes flickering open, catching the fire's glow. She didn't speak, but her gaze traced him. His weathered flannel, his hands scarred from years of rope and rock. Ethan offered the mug, steam curling like a village ghost. "Drink," he said, his voice low, steady. She took it, her fingers trembling, brushing his. The touch lingered, a pulse in the dim. "Who are you?" Her voice was a rasp, like wind through dry reeds. "Ethan, just a wanderer." He sat back, giving her space. "You're safe now." She nodded, sipping the broth, her eyes never leaving him. "Madeline," she whispered, as if testing the name's burden. The tent felt smaller, their breaths mingling with the cedar-sharp air. Ethan's heart, so used to solitude, thumped a new rhythm. He told her of the crash, the car twisted like a broken bird, of carrying her through the snow. Her face softened, but a shadow crossed it. Something unspoken, sharp as a stone in a quiet pool. He didn't press. Instead, he spoke of the mountains, of a deer he'd freed from a trap, its hooves kicking up dust as it fled. "It looked back," he said, "like it knew I'd helped." Madeline's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You save things." Her words were soft, but they cut deep, stirring a memory Ethan kept buried. His mother's hands weaving nettle into cord, teaching him strength before she faded. He shrugged, hiding the ache. "Just what's in front of me." Hours passed, the storm's howl now a murmur. Ethan kept watch, his eyes scanning her for signs of pain. She ate slowly, strength creeping back. The firelight danced on her face, revealing a bruise along her jaw, a relic of the crash. He reached for his pack, pulling out a cloth and a tin of salve. "Hold still," he said, dabbing the bruise. She flinched, then stilled, her breath catching as his fingers grazed her skin. The act was simple, but it wove a knot between them, delicate as a spider's silk. Madeline's eyes drifted to the tent's roof, as if seeing beyond it. "My father," she murmured, then paused, her voice a choked whisper. "His plans, always his plans. Marriages, mergers, my life mapped in his boardroom. Last week, he chose my future husband. I know a place, hidden, where his reach fades." The words spilled, raw, a glimpse of a cage forged in gold. Ethan froze, the cloth in his hand. The word, father, carried a burden he couldn't grasp, like a song cut off mid-note. She didn't continue, and he didn't ask. Her silence was a wall, but behind it, he sensed a truth, sharp as a blade hidden in silk. He turned away, stoking the fire, giving her the quiet she needed. His own memories stirred, his mother's hands, the ache of her absence, the years of wandering to outrun it. He glanced at Madeline, her face half lit, and saw a shadow of his own loss, her cage gold where his was the ache of his mother's faded hands. The tent, small and rough, became a sanctuary, its walls holding their shared fragility. Outside, an owl hooted, its call slicing the night. Madeline shifted, pulling the blanket tighter. "Why do you live like this?" she asked, her voice stronger now. "No home, no anything." Ethan's hands stilled. "The wild's honest," he said. "No lies, no chains." He met her gaze, and for a moment, their eyes locked. Two souls caught in a fleeting current. Her question wasn't just about him. It was about her world, her chains. She looked away, her fingers twisting the blanket's edge. "I don't know, honest," she said, so soft he barely heard. The words hung, heavy as mist over a village pond. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to ask, to pull the truth from her, but her eyes held a plea. "Let it be." He nodded, silent, the fire's crackle filling the space. The night deepened, and Madeline's breathing slowed, sleep claiming her. Ethan sat, his back against the tent's frame, the mug cold in his hands. Her murmured father, her flight from his chosen match, her hidden haven, echoed in his mind, a secret unspooled but not yet seen. Who was she, this woman who carried such burden? The fire dimmed, and he vowed to keep her safe, not just from the cold, but from whatever shadowed her soul. The tent's fire dwindled to embers, casting a faint glow over Madeline's sleeping form. Ethan Carter sat, his eyes tracing the shadows on the canvas. The Rockies' silence, now a heavy hush. The storm had passed, leaving a world of ice and starlight. Madeline's breath was steady, her auburn hair a soft tangle against the sleeping bag. Ethan's hands, rough from years of rope and stone, rested on his knees, but his mind churned. Her murmured father, her weighted silence, it lingered like a stone in a quiet pool. Dawn crept in, pale light seeping through the tent's seams. Madeline stirred, her hazel eyes blinking open, catching the first rays. She sat up, wincing, the bruise on her jaw a dark bloom. Ethan handed her a tin cup of boiled snow, its steam curling like a village ghost. "Morning," he said, his voice low, steady. She nodded, sipping, her gaze flicking to him, then away as if afraid to linger. "You're stronger," he said, packing his knife and flint. "We'll move soon. Find a ranger station." Madeline's fingers tightened on the cup. Thank you." Her voice was soft, but it carried a tremor, like a leaf caught in a breeze. Ethan busied himself, checking the fire, but her eyes pulled him back. They held a story, one she hadn't told. He crouched near her, his movements deliberate, like a deer stepping through frost. "What happened out there?" he asked, not about the crash, but the weight she carried. She looked down, her hands twisting the blanket's edge. "I was driving, escaping," she said, her voice cracking. "My father chose my future, a husband I'd never love. My life, it's not mine." Her voice cracked, and Ethan saw it, a glimpse of her world all marble and mirrors, where every step was measured. He knew cages, though his were made of grief, not gold. He nodded, letting her words settle. "The mountains don't judge," he said. "They just are." He glanced at the tent's roof, where a tear showed a sliver of sky. "Found a hawk once, wing broken. I bound it, let it go when it healed. It didn't owe me anything." Madeline's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You're strange, Ethan." But her eyes softened, like a pond catching starlight. She shifted, pulling the blanket closer. "I had a locket," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "My mother's. Its memory haunts me, lost among the wreck's scattered shards." She touched her neck, where it once rested, her fingers tracing an empty space. The word mother struck Ethan like a stone. His own mother's hands, weaving nettle into cord, flashed in his mind, a ghost of loss. He saw Madeline anew, not an heiress, but a daughter, her sorrow a quiet echo of his own. "What was she like?" he asked, his voice softer than he meant. Madeline's gaze drifted, as if seeing beyond the tent. "Kind. She sang to me, old songs, before she was gone." Her fingers lingered at her neck, the gesture raw, unguarded. "Those songs were all I had left." Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her of his mother, of nights under Oregon stars, but the words stayed locked. Instead, he said, "Maybe they're still out there." A lie, but it felt like hope. Her eyes met his, piercing, and for a moment, the tent was the world. "You don't know me," she said, but it wasn't cold. It was a plea, as if testing his sight. "Why do this?" "Because you're here," he said, simple, true. "That's enough." The air shifted, charged like the moment before rain. Madeline's gaze held a new light, seeing him not as a wanderer, but as a man who carried his own ghosts. Her mother's songs reshaped her in his eyes, her wealth a shadow to her grief. He stood, breaking the spell, and packed his gear, his hands quick but his heart heavy. "We should go," he said, glancing outside. The snow gleamed, a path to safety. Madeline nodded, rising, her movements stiff but resolute. She pulled on her coat, its fine wool out of place in the wild. Ethan doused the fire, the embers hissing like a fading song. As they stepped into the cold, the stars faded, dawn's light spilling over the peaks. Madeline paused, her breath a soft cloud. "Ethan," she said, her voice a thread, "I won't forget this." He met her gaze and something passed between them. A vow, unspoken, like a candle lit in a village dusk. He didn't know her world, its chains and chandeliers, but he knew her heart, fragile and fierce. Her mother's songs bound them, a knot he couldn't yet name. They moved through the snow, Ethan's steps sure, Madeline's close behind, ridges casting long shadows on the frost. Her grief, her truth, had cracked something open, and Ethan felt it. A pull, not to her wealth, but to her soul, like a leaf drifting on a quiet current. The Rockies gleamed under a brittle dawn, snow crunching beneath Ethan Carter's boots as he led Madeline through the winds. Her auburn hair caught the light, a flicker of warmth against the frost. She moved stiffly, the crash's bruises lingering, but her hazel eyes were sharp, tracking Ethan's sure steps. The air bit their faces, yet the silence between them was softer now, woven with her mother's songs and the tense shared truths. Ethan's pack hung light, but his heart carried a new weight, her gaze, her grief, a knot he couldn't cut. "Keep close," he said, his voice low, slicing the cold. He pointed to a cliff ahead, where a ranger station's smoke curled like a village beacon against the clouds. Madeline nodded, her breath a faint cloud, her fine wool coat dusted with snow. She hadn't spoken of her mother again, but her song's echo hung between them, a silent melody. The path narrowed, ice slick underfoot. Ethan's hand steadied her when she slipped, her fingers gripping his, brief but firm. The touch sparked, like flint on steel, and their eyes met, hers searching, his guarded. "Thanks," she murmured, her voice a reed in the wind. He nodded, releasing her, his pulse a quiet drum. The cliffs loomed, their edges indifferent, but Ethan felt the shift, a bond, fragile as a spider's silk, tightening. They crested the cliff, the station's log walls in sight. Ethan's chest loosened, safety was near. But Madeline slowed, her gaze distant, as if the station marked a return to chains. "What's waiting for you?" he asked, his words sharp, cutting through her silence. She hesitated, her fingers twisting the coat's hem. "Expectations," she said, the word heavy, like a stone dropped in a quiet pool. "A life I didn't choose." Her eyes flicked to him, raw, unguarded. "You wouldn't understand." Ethan's jaw tightened. He knew cages, grief's quiet bars, the ache of his mother's lost hands. "Try me," he said, his voice softer but firm. She looked away, the wind stealing her answer. The station loomed, and time pressed them forward. At the station's door, a ranger greeted them, his radio crackling. Madeline's name, Blake, drew a raised brow, its weight hinting at a world of power Ethan couldn't yet fathom. She spoke, her voice steady, weaving a tale of the crash, omitting the tense intimacy. The ranger offered a phone, and she dialed, her fingers trembling. Ethan caught a name, Father, before she turned away, her words muffled. The ranger, radio still buzzing, stepped outside to signal the chopper, his boots fading in the snow. Ethan stood back, his eyes on Madeline. She hung up, her face pale, a shadow crossing it. "They're coming," she said, her voice flat, like a pond gone still. The ranger returned briefly, then left to check the radio, his presence a fleeting bridge to safety. Outside, the cold sharpened. Madeline's gaze lingered on Ethan, a question unasked. "You didn't have to save me," she said, her words a breath. "You were there," he replied, echoing his truth from the tent. "That's enough." Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes locking with his, a gesture small but heavy, like a leaf falling on a quiet path. Ethan's heart thumped, caught in her nearness. Then the roar of a helicopter shattered the silence, its blades slicing the sky. Madeline's face hardened, her world reclaiming her. "Go," Ethan said, stepping back, his voice steady despite the ache. She nodded, her eyes holding his, a promise or a plea. The chopper landed, and men in suits spilled out, their voices clipped, their eyes cold. Madeline glanced back once, her silhouette swallowed by the machine's roar. Ethan stood alone, the wind carrying her away. Back in his pack, Ethan rummaged for his flint and found it. Cold metal, a locket slipped from her coat in the wreck's chaos. Its silver worn, etched with initials, MB her mother's. He kept it, sensing it held her heart, a knot he hadn't seen. Her mother's songs, her truth, weren't just a moment. They were a bridge, spanning their separate worlds. Days later, in her marble halls, Madeline's thoughts circled the tent. Ethan's steady hands, his voice weaving tales of hawks. Her father's voice droned, plans for empires, but her heart was elsewhere, caught in the wild's honest pulse. She saw Ethan's eyes sharp as flint and felt a crack in her gilded cage. Ethan wandered the mountains, the locket in his pocket, a secret he couldn't release. Her name, Blake, echoed now, whispers of wealth and power he now grasped. Yet it wasn't her world that held him. It was her gaze, her loss, the way she'd seen him. The locket's initials burned, a memory not his but theirs, tying him to a woman now gone, yet closer than the stars above the frost. Madeline Blake stood in her penthouse, the city's skyline a cold glitter beyond the glass. Chandeliers shone, but her hazel eyes saw only the Rockies' snow, Ethan's fire-lit tent, his steady hands. 3 weeks since the chopper tore her from him, and her heart, raw as a fresh wound, refused her old life. Her father's voice echoed from boardrooms, mergers, legacies. But it was Ethan's whisper, "You're safe," that anchored her. The locket's absence gnawed, a lost piece of her mother, yet Ethan's face, scarred and kind, filled the void. She slipped from the gala, her silk gown awry, and dialed a contact, a private investigator. "Find him," she said, voice sharp, giving Ethan's name, the ranger station's location. No questions. Her father's men watched, their eyes like hawks, but she moved fast, a shadow breaking free. The investigator's call came at dawn. Ethan Carter, last seen in a mountain town, living light, no ties. Her pulse raced. She booked a flight, her hands trembling, defying the weight of her name. In the Rockies, Ethan trudged a familiar trail, the locket worn in his pocket. Its initials, MB, burned, tying him to Madeline, a woman whose world he now grasped. His green eyes scanned the hills, but her face haunted him. Her grief, her strength, the way she'd seen him. At 28, he'd fled roots, his mother's woven cords his only home, yet Madeline's presence lingered, a knot in his solitary wild. He camped by a river, its murmur a faint echo of her voice. I won't forget this. A truck's rumble broke the quiet. Two men, city-sharp in their coats, stepped out, their eyes cold as steel. Carter, one barked, stay away from her. Ethan's jaw tightened, the locket a weight against his thigh. Don't know what you mean, he said, voice steady but his fist clenched. One hissed, her father's orders. Keep her in line. They didn't talk. They swung. Ethan ducked, his body lithe from years of rock and rope. But a fist caught his ribs, another his jaw. He hit the dirt, blood sharp on his tongue, their boots a brutal rhythm. She's not yours, the other spat. Then they were gone, tires spitting gravel. Ethan lay, breath ragged, the river's song his only company. Pain flared, but worse was the betrayal. Her world had reached him, its claws sharp. He staggered up, the locket's chain tangled in his fingers. Madeline's face flashed, her eyes her plea, and he knew. This wasn't her doing. He spat blood, resolve hardening. He wouldn't run. Madeline's rental car roared into the town, dusk painting the hills. The investigator's report, a scribbled note of Ethan's haunt, led her to a diner, its neon buzz a faint pulse. She'd wired the investigator's fee at dawn, a final tie to her old world severed. Inside she saw him, Ethan, bruised, his flannel torn, nursing coffee at the counter. Her heart lurched, guilt a blade in her chest. She crossed the room, her heels sharp on the wood, and slid beside him. Ethan, she whispered, her voice a reed in the din. His green eyes met hers, wary but alive. Madeline. The name was a breath, heavy with questions. She saw the bruises, the cut on his lip, and her hand reached out, stopping short. Who did this? Her voice cracked, anger and shame warring within. Your people, he said, not cruel but true. Her father's orders, they said. He pulled the locket from his pocket, its silver worn, etched with initials, MB. Found this, in the wreck. Her breath caught, the initials a stab of memory. Her mother's songs, her warmth, flooded back. Tears pricked, but she held his gaze. I didn't send them, she said, fierce, her gaze holding his, the locket between them, her look a steady rhythm. I came for you. Ethan's chest tightened, her look a fire through the pain. He saw her, not the heiress, but the woman who'd shared his tent, her grief a song he'd learned to hear. Why? He asked, his voice raw, searching her eyes. Because you saw me, she said, simple, true. Not my name, not my cage, me. The diner's hum faded, the world shrinking to their shared gaze, the locket's weight. Ethan's ribs ached, but her words healed something deeper, a wound he'd carried since his mother's voice fell silent. He squeezed her hand, a vow unspoken. I'm here, he said, echoing the tense truth. Madeline's heart steadied, the locket a bridge between their worlds. Her father's empire loomed, its threats real, but she chose now. Ethan, the wild, a life honest and raw. She stood, pulling him with her, her grip firm. Come with me, she said, not a question, but a path. Ethan rose, the bruises a dull throb, her hand his anchor. The locket burned in his palm, their loss a quiet harmony. They stepped into the dusk, the hills watching, their shadows merging on the frost. Her world had wounded him, but her choice, him overall, cracked open a rift, not in them but in the chains that bound her soul, like a leaf settling on a quiet current. Dusk bled over the Rockies, painting the slopes in hues of ash and amber. Madeline Blake drove, her hands steady on the wheel, Ethan Carter beside her, his bruised face half lit by the fading sun. The locket rested in her coat pocket, its edges worn against her heart. The rental car's hum was a fragile knot, binding them as they fled the town, the diner's neon glow a memory. Madeline's hazel eyes flicked to Ethan, his green gaze fixed on the road, wary but resolute. Her father's men had struck, Their warning a bruise on his ribs, but her choice, Ethan over her gilded cage, burned brighter than fear. The car climbed a winding path, gravel crunching under tires. Madeline's voice broke the silence, sharp as a reed in the wind. "There's a cabin," she said. "An old friend's, a poet who fled the city. She left me the key. No one knows it." Ethan nodded, his jaw tight, the Locket's chain a tether to her truth. He didn't ask who hunted them. Her world's claws were clear. The air thickened, cedar sharp, as the cabin emerged, a log refuge tucked in a valley's embrace, its windows dark but promising shelter. Inside, the air was cool, smelling of cedar and dust. Madeline lit a lantern and a small candle, their glow a beacon against the night, casting shadows on the plank walls. Ethan dropped his pack, wincing, his ribs a dull fire. She moved to him, her fingers brushing his torn flannel. "Let me see," she said, her voice firm, hiding the tremor in her chest. He lifted his shirt, revealing bruises like storm clouds on his skin. Her breath caught, guilt a blade twisting deeper. She found a first aid kit, her hands quick, dabbing antiseptic with care. Ethan's eyes held hers, not flinching, though pain sharpened his breath. "You don't owe me," he said, his voice low, raw. Madeline paused, her fingers still. "I owe you everything," she countered, fierce, her eyes piercing his. "You pulled me from death. You saw me." The Locket's memory, her mother's initials, flashed, a bridge between their wounds. Ethan's hand caught hers, brief but warm, a pulse steady as a drum. "Then see me now," he said, softer, his gaze a question, not a demand. They sat by the lantern, the cabin a cocoon against the night. Madeline's words spilled, swift, unpolished. "My father built an empire, real estate, power, lies dressed in gold. I was his heir, not his daughter." Her voice cracked, the locket worn in her pocket. "I ran that night, from him, from it all. The crash, it wasn't just an accident." Ethan's chest tightened, her truth a mirror to his own flight, from grief, from roots. "I know running," he said, his voice steady, cutting the quiet. "Lost my mother young, her woven cords. They're all I kept. The wild's my home because it doesn't ask for more." He leaned forward, his scarred hands open. "But you're not running now, you're here." Madeline's eyes glistened, her mother's locket a chain she clutched. "I thought freedom was escape," she said, her words a leaf settling on a quiet current. "But it's this, choosing you, choosing truth." She pulled the locket out, its silver worn, etched with initials. MB. This was her, all I had, until you. Ethan's breath hitched, her words cracking his solitude. He saw her, not the heiress, but the woman who'd shared his tent, her grief a song he'd learned to hear. "I'm no hero," he said, voice rough, "just a man who couldn't leave you." His fingers brushed the locket, then her hand, a vow unspoken, like a candle lit in a storm. The cabin's silence deepened, broken only by a distant owl's call. Madeline stood, pacing, her silk scarf trailing like a ghost. "They'll come," she said, her voice sharp again. "My father, his men. They won't let me go." Her eyes met Ethan's, fierce, resolute. "But I won't go back, not to that cage." Ethan rose, his bruises a dull ache, her fire kindling his own. "Then we face them," he said. Simple, true, together. He stepped closer, the space between them charged like air before rain. "What do you want, Madeline? Not them? Not me? What's yours?" Her lips parted, the question a blade to her core. She saw her mother's smile, Ethan's steady hands, the wild's honest pulse. "A life that's mine," she said, her voice rising, clear as a bell. "Not theirs, not chained." She faced him, her eyes tracing his, a bond as raw as the earth. "And you're part of it. We could build something here. Trails, homes, for the locals, not empires. Funded by the jewels I kept hidden, not my father's gold." Ethan's chest tightened, his fear of roots rising, but her eyes held him. "I've run from home," he said, voice rough, "but with you I'd stay." Her vision, trails, community, stirred him, a route he could choose. "We'd call it Horizon Ridge," he added, testing the name, a spark in the dark. The words hung, a reckoning soft as dawn. Madeline leaned into him, her head against his shoulder, the locket's edges a quiet harmony. "I'll go public," she said, her voice a song shared by the winds. "Tell the world, my love for you, my break from them. They can't chain what's free." Her eyes blazed, not with triumph, but resolve, like a stone smoothed by time. Ethan's throat tightened, her courage a fire he'd shield. "That's a storm," he said, his voice low, honest. "Bigger than the one we met in." He squeezed her hand, the locket between them. "But I'm with you." A creak outside snapped their gaze to the door. Ethan moved, swift, peering through the window. The night was still, but tension coiled, a wolf in the dark. Madeline's hand found his arm, her touch steadying. "Not yet," she whispered, sensing the quiet. "But soon." A note slipped under the door, the investigator's final report, confirming Ethan's safety, a debt she'd repaid. They sat again, the lantern's glow a fragile shield. Her father's empire reeled, lawsuits fading under public scorn, his men silenced by her truth. Madeline's breath slowed, her warmth a tether Ethan hadn't known he craved. Ethan's arm circled her, his heart steady despite the ache in his ribs. They weren't the escape they'd sought, not a tent, not a flight. They were a beginning, a path winding to an unseen home, its shape theirs to carve. Outside, the wind stirred, ridges humming secrets. The lantern flickered, its light a bridge to dawn. Their shared truth was a quiet strength, the locket's initials, MB unworn, not a chain but a promise, tying their wounds to a shared dawn. Ethan's eyes drifted to the window, the stars faint but sure, and he knew. What they sought wasn't freedom alone, but each other, a truth as raw and real as the mountain's pulse. Dawn broke over the Rockies, its light spilling gold across the winds. Ethan Carter and Madeline Blake stood outside their cabin, a modest log shelter cradled in a hill's fold. The air was crisp, scented with earth and promise. Ethan's green eyes traced the horizon, his hand resting on a wooden sign, Horizon Ridge. Madeline, her auburn hair loose, leaned into him, her hazel eyes bright, the locket, her mother's, warmed by her skin at her throat. Their project, a sustainable tourism venture, hummed with life, trails mapped, local hands hired, the wild's pulse honored. A year had passed since the cabin's candlelit vows. Madeline's public stand, her love for Ethan, her break from her father's empire, had roared like a storm, headlines blazing, her father's threats crumbling under public scorn. His empire faded, lawsuits abandoned, a shadow no longer cast. Ethan's bruises had healed, but her choice, fierce and true, scarred his heart with hope. They'd built this life, not grand but honest, each plank and path a defiance of her gilded cage. Horizon Ridge grew slowly, funded by Madeline's hidden jewels, built by local hands, its trails a dream born in the cabin's glow. Workers bustled nearby, their laughter a song shared by the winds. A young guide trained by Ethan waved, her boots kicking dust. Madeline smiled, her fingers brushing his sleeve, a warmth shared. "They're proud," she said, her voice clear, a leaf settling on a quiet current. "This is theirs too." Ethan nodded, his scarred hand squeezing hers. "Ours," he said, simple, true. His wandering days, fleeing his mother's woven cord, felt distant now, her warmth a new root. His hand grazed the sign, his fear of roots now a choice. He'd planted them, with her, in this earth. The locket's initials MB caught the sun, tying their past to this dawn. "You made this," he added, his eyes on her, not the sign. Madeline's chest tightened, his words afire. She'd traded marble halls for this. Calloused hands, a life carved from truth. Her father's voice, once a chain, was a faint echo, drowned by the cloud's hum. She turned to Ethan, her gaze piercing. "We made this," she said, her hand resting on her belly, a secret shared in their quiet nights. Their child due in spring was proof. Love, rooted in truth, could weather any storm. They walked a trail, gravel crunching, the clouds casting quiet shadows. Ethan's flannel brushed her arm, his steps sure, as if the wild still spoke to him. Madeline's coat, simple now, carried no trace of her old world. A bird called, its cry sharp, and Ethan paused, pointing to a hawk circling above. "Free," he said, his voice low, a memory of their tent, their first truths. Madeline's lips curved, her mother's songs alive in the wind. "Like us," she said, her hand finding his. The locket rested against her skin, not a weight, but a wing. They stood, the trail stretching ahead, its end unseen but theirs to shape. The workers' voices faded, the world shrinking to their clasped hands, the hawk's shadow on the frost. Ethan's heart thumped, her nearness a home he'd never dared claim. He saw her strength, her grief, the woman who'd chosen him over empires. "Whatever comes," he said, his words a promise carved in their steps, "we're enough." His fingers traced her palm, a bond as raw as the earth beneath them. Madeline nodded, her eyes glistening, not with tears but clarity. She saw him, his scars, his kindness, the man who'd pulled her from death and given her life. The child within her stirred, a flutter of hope, and she pressed closer, her breath a soft cloud. "Always," she said, her voice a stone smoothed by time. The sun climbed, its light a tender dawn, not a final answer. Their healing, incomplete but shared, was a harmony, not a triumph. The cabin stood behind, its roof a shield against old shadows. Ethan and Madeline turned back, their steps light, the trail a path they'd walked together. The hawk soared, its cry a melody, and the winds hummed, their pulse a heartbeat, hers, his, their child's, woven into the wild's quiet song. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that hope can be found in the most surprising moments, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Heartwarming Love Story. We bring you stories that touch the soul, renew your belief in kindness, and highlight what's truly important in life.